presence of being present, the gift of being embodied, the gift of being awake and alive in the moment. And I talked about this a little bit in my new moon video for the Aquarius new moon, because I feel like it is so in the atmosphere right now, in the energy right now, as something that needs to be talked about. But I wanted to make a whole other video about it because it ties into some themes that don't have to do with astrology. So if you're more interested in that astrology video, you can check that out. But I wanted to just start by talking a little bit about my story. And one of the things I'm really grateful for is that I had my oldest when I was pregnant when I was 24. So I was a pretty young mom considering for today's day and age. And if I had waited and had my kids later, like by the time I had my third child, that was when my mom, we found out she had terminal cancer and she was passing at that time. So she didn't really get to know my third child as well as I would have liked. But one of the gifts about that time period, because I feel like we are who we are. Sorry, my contacts are acting up. So we are who we are. And then if we go through a transformative process, we change, right? We undergo this dramatic transformation and we come out the other side different. And so that's what happened with my first child. I came out the other side and I picked up all of this programming, all of this junk from my mother's lineage about being a mother. And even though I had done a lot of healing work, the transformation process of becoming a mom, even though it graduated me into this whole expansion into my sense of like time and awareness of how I wanted to be in the world and how I really wanted to show up for this child, I also took on a lot of issues around being a mother and around receiving help and receiving support and a lot of other stuff. And one of my biggest memories was walking with my mom, and we were at it was dusk, it was just about to get dark, and I had my little baby in my carrier, and we were at like a fair. It was like a street fair, and there were vendors out, there was art, and it was something that my mom always loved and always, would go out of her way to expose us to when we were kids. And here I was being a mom and having my little babers in the carrier, and my mom made a comment about wanting, she's a heavier woman. She started gaining weight later in her years. Hi, if you're just joining me. And she started gaining weight in her later years. And what she said to me, she was like, it was such a relief to gain weight. It was such a relief to get older, because then I didn't have to receive the attention from men. It was like I started to become invisible. And we were out walking, and I could tell she was getting anxious because it was getting darker out, and here she was with her daughter and her grandchild. And it like blew my mind. My mind was blown open that she would make choices in her life to make herself smaller, not literally, like to make herself not as visible or as a spotlight to the opposite sex because out of fear. And one of the things that I realized, these last 18 months I've been doing deep working on my masculine feminine flow and balance. And one of the things I realized when I'm working with the feminine and through the generations, like my mother's first memory was, she always would say like one of her first memories was watching her mom get chased around the dining room table by her stepfather with a knife in his hand. That was one of her first core memories. And so this lineage that I come from of women feeling not safe in their bodies, not safe in the presence of men. Hi, it's funny because a lot of guys are showing up here. So hi, if you're just joining me, I'm talking about the gift of presence and the difference between the masculine and feminine. But one of the things I wanted to say about that was when you come from a lineage where, and this is for men and women, we all have masculine and feminine within us, right? And we want to strike that, whatever, it doesn't necessarily have to be balanced, but whatever fluidity within that masculine and feminine that makes sense to us and feels good to us, right? So So when I started learning more about the feminine and wanting to be more in my feminine energy, I mean, I naturally have the feminine, I naturally have the masculine, but when wanting to get into more of that feminine energy, one of the things I realized, I am so sorry, my contact is not acting like it should, and it's the right side, that's the masculine side. So I'm trying to stay focused. Oh my goodness. Okay, so one of the things about learning how to be in this receiving energy of the feminine, one thing that I realized really quickly was, oh, well, all of throughout the lineage of my women in my family, they haven't felt safe receiving, because when they were receiving violence, they were receiving threats, they were receiving, it wasn't safe to be in the receptive mode. It wasn't a safe place to be. And, when we come from that lineage of just naturally, you're going to have it if you go back far enough, that we weren't safe in a certain energy, or we weren't safe in that receptive mode, those things transfer over if they're not healed. So whoever is going to do the healing work for it can pave the way for the next generations, right? So one of the things I recognized was that if we're not feeling safe in the receptive mode, if we're only feeling safe in the giving, doing mode, then we can get stuck there, and we can be in a pattern where we don't feel like we need anyone else, or we don't feel like we can trust anyone else, or we don't feel like we can receive help or community support or whatever we need. I'm literally about to, I think I'm just going to take my contact out, you guys, because it's driving me nuts. Oh, okay, there we go. So now I can focus. So basically, to be in that receptive mode, we have to feel safe enough to receive. One of the interesting things is kind of that balance of the masculine and feminine is, in order to be in that receptive mode, we have to be present in the moment, right? Like we have to be fully embodied in that moment. Where we are, what we're doing, we have to be there. And in order to feel safe in the present moment, we have to be in a place where our masculine can feel safe in the presence. And so we have to invite in both of these things. The embodiment of the feminine requires our presence. And when we are fully embodied, that is a feminine principle, right? The masculine is so drawn to the feminine within us. This is within us. Hi, Loki. Hello. I'm so sorry, guys. The masculine within us craves presence and craves getting to that presence for itself. So how it does this is why the masculine is so drawn to when the feminine is embodying, and women that are embodying things, are fully present in things. They're drawn to that. But what's interesting is that for the feminine, and the feminine to feel safe receiving that from the masculine, hello, the feminine needs to feel safe enough to receive from the masculine, and what makes them, the feminine within us all, feel safe to receive is presence. So presence is the common denominator for both the masculine and the feminine to feel like they can both be in this balanced place, in this place of feeling good and feeling like they can receive and they can give and they can be in the moment. That presence is what's required. But the things that fracture us or cut us off from that presence are really what we want to think about or have in our consciousness. So one of the things about that, when we're leaning too far into our masculine and we're not balancing it with our feminine, and like I said, this is for men and women, when we're not balancing this or we're not finding a fluidity that feels good to us, if we're too much in the masculine, we are going to be forward thinking, overthinking, thinking 5 steps ahead, not hearing what someone around us is saying, not even listening maybe to what they're saying because you're already thinking about 5 steps ahead and where you need to go and the strategy that you need to use and the things that you're going to need to think about and the things that you're going to need to talk about. And that is like the masculine wound around not being present. And so to bring it back to the breath, it's just so simple, and we make it so confusing. So bringing it back to our breath. And that brings us back to our presence. And with the feminine, when the feminine is afraid to receive, or they don't feel trusting in that receptive mode, there's also an overthinking that happens, where there's a fear of not being able to trust, or a fear of being led astray, or a fear of not being supported in the way that they are going to need to be supported. So the wound there is also overthinking, and that takes that more fluidity of the feminine away from being in their full feminine energy, and away from being in that full embodiment energy. Because that's the unique thing with the feminine, is the feminine can embody even postural changes that allow them to come into their presence more. And so even though the breath is super important for the feminine, really what I would say is posturally changing things in the physical body can really, like, making a more open change to your body. If you notice that you're like, with me, I'm like always noticing my shoulders, and so I'm like having to relax my shoulders. Like, I don't have to be in that masculine energy of overthinking, and just by relaxing my shoulders, that will initiate me to do the deeper breathing. But a lot of times I can't just get there by starting with the breath work. I feel like the masculine, or the more masculine leaning individuals, can do that, but with the feminine, I feel like it's a postural change. So when I'm talking about all this, it's really just to get us into the presence. And why should we strive to be in the presence? Why is that important? And I was telling that story about my mother, and like just anything she could do to like kind of keep the masculine at a distance, or keep the eye of the masculine away from her, and how that not wanting to be seen, or that not wanting to be in the receptive mode, the receiving mode from the masculine, also meant that she missed out on a lot of things, and she wasn't in her power, and there was a lot of drawbacks to the choices that we make. And sometimes we make these choices out of wanting to be comfortable, but ultimately that's not really going to lead us to the places that we want to go in this lifetime, right? So with that, and with that presence, when we can be fully trusting and fully knowing that we can, our inner masculine, our inner feminine can take care of ourselves, even if some attention gets thrown at us that we don't want, or even if we are having to do things in our life that we don't necessarily want to do. When we're showing up and we're present, posturally, taking deeper breaths, it's a gift to everyone around us. And one of the things I talked about in my last video was the difference, when you can tell the difference between someone that you're going to for a medical issue, even at the grocery store, out in the world, when you can tell the difference between someone that's present, and when you can tell the difference between someone who's not all the way there. And what a gift it is to be just in the presence of someone who is present, especially in this day and age where everybody's on their phone, everybody's scrolling, everybody's seeking and 10 steps ahead, or thinking of this thing or over here. It is such a gift to be in this present moment. So thank you for being in this present moment with me if you're here. And when we are in the presence of someone that's in the present moment, that vibrates a little higher, and it sets the tone a little bit different, and it can have the effect on us of very subtly making a shift in our whole day, very subtly bringing our attention back to ourselves. And so this is where, when people talk about meditation, self-care, investing in ourselves, doing your healing work, and there's this programming around that's selfish, or you shouldn't spend that much money, or you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't take the time in the morning to meditate, because what is that really going to do? This is where we can call that bullshit. That's where we can really see how, if I'm affected by this person out in the world in a positive way, likely they're doing things in their private life that are helping their energy to be bigger and more condensed in a way that we shine brighter. And so we can see how by them doing that work, by them embodying that work, by them being present, that makes us take a deeper breath. That makes us relax our shoulders a little bit. That makes us be in this higher vibration. And so the presence of that ripples out to your whole community. The gift of being present is something that can't be understated, especially right now, especially in today's world. And so in order to be in that present, we have to be in it with our breath. We have to be in a postural space for us to embody that. Thank you, Johnny. And one of the ways we do that is, by knowing our own balance of masculine and feminine, by knowing our expanded self, by knowing the things that we have feared in our life around being in our masculine and our feminine. And again, we all have our masculine and our feminine, but where have we stumbled? Where have we had resistance to being in our full feminine? Where have we had resistance? Where have we had fear from being in that masculine? And how can we weave those two together to tend to each other within ourselves so that we can be present? And so I just had a beautiful 90-minute massage from a wonderful woman in my community. And, this was all very present for me as I was receiving that massage in a very present way. And this whole idea of the safety of receiving and the safety of being in the moment, being present. And how by any one of us choosing to be with that, choosing to invest in that for ourselves, choosing to embody that, we become the gift. We become the gift. And so I just want you to remember that as you're moving through your week, as we're coming to this opportunity to finally release for the Lunar New Year, which is on Thursday. And I also want to invite you to join me Friday because I am hosting a workshop on the feminine about getting into your creative juices, getting them flowing. We all have the masculine and feminine. If you're interested or wanting to heal and wanting to be with that feminine essence a little bit more, that's what we're